But what it did, it made us believers that you could change the world, that you could be engaged in something that made a real difference. We looked these patients in the eye. I met almost every one of these early patients personally. I met their parents, their siblings, and we changed their lives in a very penetrating way. And we got cooperation from everybody around the world. People saying, egging us on and saying, this is a great thing. Where we thought we were alone or lonesome, and it was difficult to imagine that we could get this done. Many people that normally you would think of to be very skeptical, very on the side, including the agency, came part of this story and part of this great victory in a sense.
Give us a couple of the really great boneheaded mistakes that you made that in retrospect the Josh Boger of today knows that you shouldn't have made.
I think every time that I even flinched in the direction that Wall Street wanted me to go, it was a mistake.
People in the early days of biotech and today tried a lot of different things. The 70s and 80s and the 90s were great times for biotech, but they really weren't real in many ways. So anyway, I got a chance to meet Eric and went in with this story about kind of how we wanted to found this company called Millennium, and I think it was maybe 15 visits later.
Well, it wasn't called Millennium yet.
No, it wasn't called Millennium yet. Actually, that was Eric's name. And it was over 3 years, we talked to everybody in the genetics field, in the United States, in Europe, and Japan, all the leaders in the space, and we had umpteen meetings and tried to bring a lot of outstanding people together to really build a company, a vision of a company, there where we could identify the cause and pathway of human disease. And so through those efforts over 3 years, we founded Millennium, and we founded it out here in Boston, which was the best place to do it.
And Mass Biotech Council was founded in 1985, and they also, the second reason back in the mid to late 80s was because a lot of the local ordinances and bylaws were just not really aligned with what the industry needed, and people weren't educated as to what the industry was all about and what our partners in government needed to do and how they needed to align with us so that we could succeed. And again, that's still happening today.
What's the secret to starting a great biotech company now?
Well, a lot has changed. I'm the executive chairman of a company that has an open IND. We've manufactured drug. We have orphan drug status. We have clinical sites ready. We have FDA verbal agreement through into phase 2 plan, and we're 2 people. So
you and somebody else?
Yeah.
So somebody else do the work? Or?
Somebody else does 150% of the work. Right. So that wouldn't have been possible before. And the reason we can do that is that between us, we kind of know what needs to be done. And literally on every activity, there's somebody out there who can and is willing to do it for not that much more of a margin than even on a marginal basis it would cost to do it yourself. Now, eventually you get 4 or 5, 6, 7 projects, and it's better to have the internal resource. But as you start out, when you're N equals 1 project, it's not only cheaper, but it's possible to do it virtually and at very high quality. And when I started it at Merck in the late 1970s, the pharma industry was just starting to outsource some critical path activities. Every pharma company did every toxicological experiment inside the company, and they were just beginning to experiment with using an outside service to do toxicology. There's not a major pharma company now that does majority of its toxicology inside. So they've shifted, but the shift for a startup company now can be even more dramatic. And I'm not saying that and it means that your workforce is probably not any much different than it would be back in the old days, except you don't pay their salaries, and so you can load manage much easier and keep things done. I think that's the biggest change that I've seen. I think that ultimately makes startups cheaper. If they follow the old model, I think that's a mistake.
The big difference is the quality of people you can access in these companies. You can access people who've been in the industry 20, 30 years, have connections, have a stature and real presence in terms of making presentations. and employees who come into the lab trained. I can guarantee you in 1978, everybody we hired was basically a PhD out of a raw lab. The actual commitment of the universities was in the 50s because they recruited Watson to Harvard in the 50s and Salvador Luria, who trained Watson, to MIT. So the two universities made a bet on genes in the 50s that then in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, created an environment for what happened here in biotech.
When you see what the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, as a patient organization, is able to do, it absolutely dwarfs, and I don't mean the basic research, but on the development side, what NIH can do, as Joshua can talk about. You see similar things in ALS, in Parkinson's, organizations trying to get organized, patient organizations of having a specific interest. And with Facebook and with IT, there's a way to reach across. The same people that supported the taxation needed to double the NIH budget, I think also will support the investments needed to make this industry thrive.